There's a lot of talk going on right now about Kamala Harris and the border. And I don't know, man, it's possible that we got all this stuff completely wrong for all these years, because Joy Reid and George Stephanopoulos, they say that Kamala Harris never was the border czar.
Quote unquote border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People are going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
Guys, do not let them get away with this, man. If you have never, ever read George Orwell, I got some really bad news for you. You missed your chance. You do not have to read any George Orwell anymore unless you really want to know what's coming tomorrow, because you are right smack dab in the middle of 1984 right now. The machine is losing control. It's getting completely desperate. It's getting sloppy. The machine is getting sloppy. And it needs you to be dumber than you have ever been before. It needs you to be the dumbest you could possibly be in order to have any kind of chance of saving itself. And if it has any chance at all of doing that, all of its evil forces need to combine as one. And the unholy alliance of the DNC and the mainstream liberal corporate media are doing exactly that.
She was never actually border czar.
Border czar, which was not something that was formally conveyed upon her.
She's been labeled incorrectly by some members of the right as the border czar. Republicans named her the border czar.
Republicans have always exaggerated what her job was at the border.
Republicans, again, have labeled her the border czar.
But that's not exactly what President Biden asked her to do.
She was never put in charge of the border.
That wasn't actually her task.
Not to secure it, but to address the underlying roots of migration. She was charged with leading the administration's efforts to address the root causes of migration.
The root causes of migration to the U.S.
The root causes.
Root causes.
Root causes.
The root causes.
Root causes.
Of immigration.
We also want to point out that right now, apprehension numbers continue to decrease in our country, especially over the last few months.
And I just want to note that border crossings have been going down.
And illegal border crossings are lower right now.
Migrant crossings continue to drop.
Border crossings are way down.
Border crossings are down.
Guys, please, if you have never shared one of these videos, please share this video, man. Everyone you know needs to see this. If people can watch this and still not recognize that they are completely stuck in the Matrix, just complete and total victims of the Matrix, if what they're watching the Democrat Party do with the Kamala coup and all the lengths the media will go to literally help them rewrite history, then I don't know what will wake people up. I honestly, if that won't wake them up, I don't think that anything will, right? Because what we're seeing right now, it really is, it's a complete and total rewrite, right? And some people are actually falling for it, man. And I don't know if they're actually falling for it, just falling for it. I think they're falling for it because they want to. They do not want to believe the truth about the left. And the truth is very, very simple. Kamala Harris was put in charge of the border. And even back then, I thought that she had just really pissed off Joey with all the racist segregation talk during the debates. And I really did back then. I thought he was setting her up to fail, which if he did, that's the last successful thing, probably the only successful thing he's ever done. And it's crazy to watch, man. In real time, the media is working like crazy to rewrite every single part of Kamala's history. And honestly, man, the media is in such lockstep. It's no wonder that the media hates Fox News so much, because Peter Doocy and Jackie Heinrich, man, they really are the only people that seem to even remember any of this stuff accurately.
Thank you, Corinne. Democrats on Capitol Hill are being handed this card with talking points. about the vice president and the border. Do you know who's handing this out?
I have no idea. You probably should ask her campaign.
So the first one says Vice President Harris was never appointed border czar. There's never been such a position. It doesn't exist. Why are Democrats so sensitive about the vice president and the border?
Why are Republicans so sensitive about actually not owning up to them getting in the way of a border deal? Why? Why won't they own up to that? Why won't they own up to the last president told them not to move forward? It was a bipartisan deal on just right there, available to them, and they voted twice against it. Twice against it. Why are they so sensitive to moving forward and actually dealing on an issue that majority of Americans care about, is dealing with what's going on at the border?
Do you think that the border would be less of a talking point now if there was less migration to the border, say if somebody had addressed root causes of migration sooner?
Wait, hold on a second. Did you not hear the beginning of I know there were a lot of toppers, but one of the toppers, I talked about what we're seeing at the border. It's down by 55%, not because of Republicans in Congress and what they did. It's because what this president and this vice president did. He moved forward and took actions to deal with what's going on at the border. Republicans continue to block getting resources to the Border Patrol agents. They continue to block actually dealing with an immigration system. So yes, we are going to debunk the false characterization of the vice president. She was not a border czar, and it's not just us. Independent fact checkers have said the same thing, that did not exist, and that is not true.
There's a lot to unpack there, man, but just a couple thoughts. If it is down 55%, I guess she means in the last few days. I can't find exactly what she's referring to anywhere, but guys, if it is true, it could be a couple things. Either, the most obvious, everyone who wants to be here is probably already here. We invited them already. The most likely thing is it's freaking hot as balls in the desert right now, right? I imagine that slows things down. Or it could also be that the Trump executive orders that Joe Biden just magically put back into place after saying that he couldn't do anything for 3.5 years, it could be those things actually worked, right? Apparently he didn't need some fake bill that no one ever read and never even existed. And the bill she's talking about never got voted down. It never got voted on at all. And she says it got voted down twice. There's no voting on something twice. It either makes it or it doesn't make it, right? But these are the kind of lies that they tell you when they're right in the middle of rewriting history completely on the fly and from the hip. And it's amazing when you think about it, man. Like, what do these people think happens after they tell their lies? I mean, do they not realize that everything comes with receipts?
He said she was Joe Biden's border czar. She wasn't. She was never put in charge of the border. She was given a much more limited assignment to lead a so-called root causes diplomatic effort trying to address the reasons in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras that people choose to migrate. Now, many Republicans scoff at this kind of fact check. They're like, there were a bunch of articles back in 2021 that called her border czar. Frankly, those articles were wrong. And if you look at CNN's own coverage, not to toot our own horn, but you'll see that the White House and Harris's office consistently, as early 21, push back on that framing.
Honestly, man, I mean, do they think that no one is going to review the tape? Do they think that we don't remember? This is the same weaselly guy that they trot out to fact check Donald Trump every time he gives a rally, every time he gives a speech. And here he is himself, the fact check guy trying to rewrite Kamala's history and CNN's history.
Very quickly, what do you think about Kamala Harris? She's supposed to be out front on these issues. She has not been. What's your takeaway from that?
Well, interestingly, they released a readout this week between her and a member of the cabinet, Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, and they talked about the incident of the Border Patrol on horseback who aggressively confronted the Haitian migrants. So it was an example of the White House showing she was connected to the issue in some way, but she has repeatedly said that she's focusing on the root causes of migration and that the border is a separate matter. What we are learning and seeing in real time is that you really can't separate the two.
Yeah, I really cannot. This has been a problem.
No kidding. Apparently, you can't separate the reasons people are coming with the fact that they're actually coming. And I don't think, can you separate people like Kamala telling the world that they're going to have health care when they get here, or people like Joe telling them to surge the border now? It's crazy. And it's very, very simple. If you wanted to keep the job, Kamala Harris, if you actually cared, if you thought you could actually win this job, you would have just done the job. I mean, this is actually really, really not complicated. You can't have a job and then ignore the job, blame any and all of your failures on the last guy, and then get promoted into the next job. It just, government is the only place that is even possible, man. And it cannot work like that. And the only way it works like that is with a lot of help from your friends.
Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
People gonna have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled.
You have to counter the misinformation. That's the one that sticks out to me. If only there was someone that they trust to walk us through it.
And the Biden administration did task Vice President Kamala Harris with the issue of migrant crossings, naming her the so-called border czar.
I've asked her, the VP, today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some back.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Obviously, man, we're already tired of the side-by-side, right? We know the truth. We see what they're doing. And I got to be honest, man, even knowing how dishonest and how despicable these people really are, even having a pretty damn good idea of what they're really capable of, it's really pretty damn remarkable to watch them do it. I mean, especially when you consider it's not the only front that they've got to fight on. They have to cover up the border stuff while at the same time convincing people that Joey didn't choose her based on her gender and that anyone who would dare suggest that is just a racist, misogynist, crazy MAGA cult member who, above all things, has got to be silenced.
It's going to be very important that I think we brace ourselves for some of the unfair, misogynistic, and racial undertones, overtones, explicit attacks, and implicit attacks that she may be subject to.
Insulting black women, you're going to see something you haven't seen before. Black men are not going to put up with that. I was on a phone call with 20,000 black men. The word protect came up about 1,000 times. Protect this sister. Protect this sister. We're going to protect her. Protect her. You're about to see something you haven't seen before. Look, people messed around with Hillary Clinton and said a bunch of mean stuff to her. Black men set that out. We won't set this out.
They want to call her a DEI president or DEI candidate. So these are just racist dog whistles. Whenever you hear DEI, I want you to think about the N-word. I want you to think about racial slurs. That's what they actually mean.
There is a way to attack her record on policy without calling her a name. Incompetent is an unflattering name. And when people do that to black women, that is what Van is talking about. You might not agree, but as a black woman, let me tell you how we hear.
It's just like, I mean, she says she could tell us as a black woman that there is a way to call Kamala out on a record without actually calling her incompetent. That just, why? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. Incompetent just means that you are, in fact, incompetent. You exhibit incompetence. And regardless of what color she is or what part she has, there is literally no better word to describe Kamala Harris than incompetent. I mean, it actually describes her better than any color or any pronoun ever could. I mean, she is incompetent. And here's the thing, man, if you're on the left and you take exception to that, well, the correct response to that would be to actually explain that she's not incompetent and how she's not incompetent. Talk about some accomplishments, something that she has actually achieved. But of course, they can't do that. That's the last thing that they can actually do because she's incompetent. So they have to hide her failures behind her color, hide them behind her gender, which honestly is pretty damn funny when you think about it. I mean, the party that can't actually define what a woman is, they want you to vote for Kamala Harris essentially just because she is one. They think you should pick her because she's a woman, even though they can't. It's just, I mean, it's amazing. But apparently that's not why Joe picked her. And if you say so, then you're just in a cult.
To me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion are literally, and that's not kidding, the core strengths of America. That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history. It taps into the full talents of our country. And starts at the top with the vice president.
And you and I have talked. You know that I prefer a black female. You've committed to a woman. You've committed to a black woman, to the Supreme Court. I won't press you on that because you've given it to a committee. But for the record, we have had that discussion, and you listened and said you're going to make the decision after the committee raises it. And credible leaders, Melanie Campbell of the Black Women's Roundtable and others have raised it. And part of it, I think, is the sensitivity of black women have to deal with sexism and racism. You know,
I think I might have figured it out. If you say someone is a DEI hire, that's wrong. You can't do that. But if you say all the words out loud, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you say them for effect, right, like a campaign speech, I think somehow that makes it okay. So we've been coming at this wrong all along. Kamala Harris is not just some run-of-the-mill DEI hire. She's a diversity, equity, and inclusion hire. And really, I mean, that's it. Her campaign was a failure, but Joe Biden picked her, not because she'd accomplished anything, not because she polled better than 6% in her own home state. She was just installed. She was installed then, and she's installed now. And she still hasn't accomplished anything. She's a really, really impressive installer, for sure. But they cannot come up with or describe even one solid accomplishment.
What do you think has been her biggest accomplishment since she's been vice president?
Oh, I have to say, since the Dobbs opinion, the way that she has rallied women and friends of women, also called men, around this country on the issue of abortion and just taken it home. First vice president in history to visit an abortion clinic.
Think about what you just heard. What Kamala Harris has accomplished is being the first sitting vice president to visit an abortion clinic. This is her crowning achievement. This is her only achievement. And Elizabeth Warren, she really had to reach for that one, right? And that's embarrassing, man. But I mean, speaking of Elizabeth Warren, though, don't forget, guys, for as great as these people want to claim Kamala Harris is right now, it was only about a year ago that most of these same people were trying to figure out a way to even get her out of the vice presidency back then.
Biden run again for president? He'll be 86 by the time his second term is over.
Yes, he should run again.
Why?
And he is running again.
If he's that old in his second term, the vice presidency becomes even more important. Should Kamala Harris be his choice the second time around?
You know, I really want to defer to what makes Biden comfortable on his team. I've known Kamala for a long time. I like Kamala, but they have to be a team.
Couldn't make it up, could you? It's not just Elizabeth Warren out to get Kamala Harris. Consider this headline from the Washington Post. Some Democrats are worried about Harris's political prospects. At a pivotal point in Biden's term, many party activists are not sure the vice president has shown she's up to winning the top job. That's the Washington Post. And it stayed up as their top story on Monday morning.
Yeah, that was a year ago, man. They didn't even want her to have a shot at the job if Joey kicked the bucket back then. I mean, they could not even stand the thought. And now she's the great white hope. Now she is the savior of the Democrat Party. And it just, you can't make it up. These people, they're insane.
But we have to remember, Vice President Harris is one of the most qualified people to run in decades. Look, she was a prosecutor, very effective.
Hold on, don't forget, man, on top of just being not just a prosecutor, she's also the only vice president in history to do a photo op at an actual abortion clinic. I mean, this is what these people have, man. This is who these people really are. They actually think that this insanity is going to work, but I can't see how it does. There's just too much that they have to hide. I mean, they cannot trick people that much. I cannot see how they do it. They have zero accomplishments to actually talk about. They have all this history to rewrite. And she's an incredibly uncomfortable and hard to bear public speaker with that crazy, crazy laugh. The only thing they have now is the same thing they had in 2020. She's not Trump. But here's the thing, man. The more you look at this, the way she's starting to look, I don't think it's going to be too long before Donald Trump is actually running on an I'm not Kamala platform. I mean, nobody likes her. No one has ever liked her. I feel bad. I'm not making fun of her. No one likes her. No one's ever appeared to like her. And just think, man, we're about to get a front row seat to exactly why. But that's just my take, man. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.
Should not be a limiting idea. If he has someone that he likes, he's someone he thinks will foot the bill, I would, in all other things being equal, pick the Hispanic because we should look like America in the court. But do not suggest that you should only pick a woman, a black, Hispanic.
I've made no decision except one. That person will be the first black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.